All right, I am back.
All right, I'm just scooting over to structures page.
Page 30 out of 77. I'll give you the link again.
I got it.
Oh, you have it. All right. Let me know when you're ready. All right. Setting up my own recording. All right. All right, getting started. Structures. Attendees, CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Mimic, CCP Larrikin, CCP Fozzie, CCP Lebowski, CCP Master Plan. Fozzie explains that this section Fozzie explains that this session is going to focus on the Upwell 2.0 release mostly. Fozzie shows an image which will be in the upcoming blog, which shows the state process. He then goes through each state explaining changes. A change has been made to the shield state that will break all incoming locks when it completes the repair timer in order to make AFK shooting at structures less powerful. Yukiko asks if players will be able to see when a structure is in the low power state. There will be visual indication, as well as the bracket name changing to low power. Sort asks whether letting Keepstars and Fortizars would not lose their service modules during the final timer. The currently proposed system would encourage having two Keepstars deployed in the same system to counter this. Fozzie says this is not in the current plan, but they could look into it. Lebowski says that there is an issue with adding not one, but two exceptions to the existing system. It would be troublesome. Jin asks if Crowd Control Productions are planning on doing any iteration on the reinforcement mechanic, specifically the ability to scrap rigs prior to destruction. Mimic says that this is actually a defect which should be fixed. Fozzie says that if it doesn't make it into the February release, it will definitely be looked at later. Edit later confirmed in another session that fix to be included in main February release. Sort asks about arming structures differently during fights to counter the actual fleet broad. Fozzie says the intent of the design is commitment and complementing the defending fleet. Fozzie goes on to say that they are going to be improving the single target anti-subcapital structure weapons. Neutralizer bombs were brought up, and the team said they were being replaced with burst projectors. They also use quite a bit more capacitor on the Keepstar. The plan is to make capacitor management matter more for structures. Sort asks if you can fit more than one. Fozzie says they will be limited to one per type. Noobman and Sort express concerns that Keepstars must be extremely conservative with their capacitor when using Doomsdays. Sort asks if it is possible to extend the Keepstar targeting range to counter the tactic which avoids fights. Sort would want to see the fight being brought to the door of the Keepstar. Noobman doesn't feel right about that. Fozzie is going to consider that. Larrikin doesn't see a problem with extending the range. Jin mentions FOF Ravens, and the room collectively groans. Larrikin replies that he is looking into that. Jin asks about Tackle. Fozzie says that they have plans for this, changing the modules to have a cooldown. Structures will also have the option of bubble projectors. A point was brought up about this working in sync with the Doomsday and whether the Scrambler will be able to hold targets long enough for the Doomsday to hit. The team is going to consider it, though, to make sure that the module is still viable. Sort asks about bumping and tethering. Fozzie says this is something they would still like to change if possible, but they can't honestly promise anything or set a timeline expectation. Sort asks if having bumping of tethered ships will be declared an exploit. Fozzie and Larrikin say no. Sort brings up Sino-beacons and jump bridges being ACL based. Fozzie would need to see some technical details before committing, something which would be great to explore. The team explains that damage cap feedback will be added, showing the damage the player hit for and how much was deflected. Blueprint locking is being actively considered right now, but won't make it into the February release. Crowd Control Productions discussed how structured docking access will be more visible after Upwell 2.0. The team says that a bunch of characters, percent, dollar sign, and etc., are going to be re-enabled for use in structure names, but this will not be in the February release. Non-player character corporations are being added to ACLs. Notification for offlining the cloning service will show how many clones are affected. Innominate suggests adding the same feature for industrial jobs which would be affected. This will be looked into. Yukiko asks if there is some way to figure out which jump clone service is being used in which structure. There was apparently a defect on this. Fozzie will be considering that. Anchoring structures will be shown in the structure browser for the owner and only for the players with the appropriate roles. A timer will also be present. The ability to self-destruct your own pods from within structures is being added as well. Noobman then brings up transferring structure ownership, which is a very instant process. Some additional safety measures would be appreciated. A topic on loyalty came up, with transferring structure ownerships to enemy coalitions. There are means to prevent this from occurring already, although albeit convoluted mechanics. This started a very long discussion about trust in Eve and, quote, this is Eve, unquote. People ended up agreeing to disagree on not adding a new mechanic to prevent sabotage. New Upwell fighters are being introduced. These will only work in structures and will be bonus to perform as if affected by character skills, as ship fighters are. Fighters will recall automatically when leave the controlling seat of a structure. Newman asks about adding modules for fighter damage or tracking. Fozzie says this is not something which can be done. Factional warfare and structures. The team wants to make some change, but there is really no way to do this without some extreme complications. Using charters to keep services running would be a possibility to at least debuff the structures located in enemy territory. Sort mentions seeing random logos being advertised on structures. This is something which audio and graphics would need to address. Removing someone from the gunner seat can only be done by directors and the chief executive officer. Having this role available to more people would be nice. Fozzie does not know why this decision was made, nor how difficult it would be to change. The Council of Stellar Management admits this is not a super common issue, but when it happens, it is extremely painful. Master Plan says this is something they will look at. End of session. All right. Shall I continue? All right. Session. Feature concepts, attendees, CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Orca, CCP Mr. Happy, CCP Paradox, CCP Rise, CCP Burger. The Council of Stellar Management votes for ships to be pink. Crowd Control Productions is adamantly silent. The remainder of this session is held under non-disclosure agreement. End of session. Session. Alpha and Omega status. Future discussion. Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Rise, CCP Mr. Happy. Steve points out the only short-term concerns were losing subscriptions immediately after launch, which did not occur. The indications are positive, no drastic changes. Alpha activity is up, but not by super crazy amounts. Crowd Control Productions is watching to see what will happen over a longer period. There is a retrospective coming up soon. Judge asks if they are content with the skill set which is available right now. Rise says they would want to have the skill set as big as possible without negative results, so there is potential for future changes. Judge asks what direction that would be expanded. Mining and exploration would probably be explored at least. It would make sense to look at different career paths. Rise doubts that there would be much more expansion done to the current alpha skill set, but they will wait and see. Yuki asks if they are generally open to any direction, which Rise says they are. Most limitations are set in place to keep alt and bot mining down, to prevent exploitation, and preventing people in the EVE economy feeling crappy about their career path. Sort asks about Tech 2 ships. The team says they would consider it, yes. Interceptors were mentioned, and this scared the Council of Stellar Management. Sort mentions that the current meta needs to be considered, and this would be the biggest concern. Right now, the meta is broken and focuses on interceptors, which would raise hell if alphas gained access to them. Interceptors for alphas would be a bigger problem than alphas in Macarials. Rise says there is a lag effect to the adoption of ships and tactics due to training times, so knowing the full effect of the alpha skill set expansion will take a bit more time. Sort mentions the metrics do not consider wars which heavily involve alpha players. Rise says that they are going to be careful and that this is not something the Council of Stellar Management needs to be concerned about right now. They will not be blindly adding new ships to the list, especially not until the effects of the most recent additions are fully understood. The Council of Stellar Management asks if there was a noticeable spike from the Judge articles written. Crowd Control Productions responds that articles on conflict and big drama will generally result in noticeable spikes. End of session. Session. Strategy Team. Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Orca, CCP Hellbunny. CCP Hellbunny went into some basics about what's happening with EVE at the moment and what the strategy team is thinking about. The strategy team is a leadership team responsible for the direction of EVE development at any given time. Sort asks if this shift towards moving client stuff into mobile is something a team is pushing for, which Hellbunny confirms. CCP Chimichanga is the technical gatekeeper, so to speak, who has given the green light from his end. Aerith brings up a Crucible-like expansion. Hellbunny says that this could totally be in the future pipeline, and wants a 20 quality of life fixes from the Council of Stellar Management, which could be placed in an expansion of this kind. Hellbunny addresses the iteration process, saying that Crowd Control Productions will continue to iterate on the features they believe in, but will stop if it isn't working or is showing diminishing returns. Yuki says that the new feature has the pivot potential where it is possible to change out various aspects inside the instance, unlike resource wars, which are very much set in stone. Sort asks if this is a new shift in Crowd Control Productions with pulling the plug on features rather than ignoring them. Hellbunny simply answers yes. Hellbunny asks the room if the community in general would be in favor of Crowd Control Productions stepping up and saying they won't work on features, similar to the Resource Wars situation. The Council of Stellar Management says yes, absolutely. Another aspect is admitting mistakes and being able to learn from it, and refer to the learned steps in the past. CCP Orca asks about the possibility of releasing information about expansions close to release date as opposed to starting feature talk in the lead up. The Council of Stellar Management all add that existing mechanics need to be fixed first in the upcoming months. Small quality of life changes to make the player base happier. Killing off and addressing jump fatigue would make the player base happy before releasing the information on the expansion. Hellbunny asks the Council of Stellar Management for a prioritized list for 20 quality of life changes they want to see. Hellbunny also assured the group that they address the problems with fatigue, but he wants to see it done right rather than seeing a hammer brought to the table. Sort points out that dev teams having freedom to iterate on the features the way they want. He is also, however, very happy to see the direction these teams were going with the interactions. Sort brings up the Sort brings the roadmap up and how it is packed and structured, with no leeway for any issues which may come up. Aerith puts it simply, asking what is the internal priority list for crowd control productions. Hellbunny says that there is never a case of the strategy team saying, hey, you stop working on this. It is always a mix of what the devs want, what the community needs, and strategy then having input in that. He also says that dev teams have a built-in buffer time for any edge case issues which may come up. The Council of Stellar Management and Hellbunny discuss the strategy and dev team relations. Hellbunny tries to clarify that the strategy team does not sit in an ivory tower dishing out commands, but rather the devs come to strategy with a list and are then asked by strategy, what do you want to do? The Council of Stellar Management appreciates the door that Hellbunny is opening to discuss these things. They really liked the open discussion which occurred in the meeting. Sort brings up the point of how the devs play the game. They feel that the devs have their hands tied due to the limits they have in the game in the sense of joining corporations. He essentially asks that crowd control productions review existing processes which are not perhaps necessary today and exist from the days of Tech 2 original blueprints. Crowd CCP Falcon refers to a point when he did an experiment with being an outed player, and that lasted 3 days since constant hounding, stalking of developers was a thing. The Council of Stellar Management points out that the identity can be hidden, but this is mostly to get the devs involved more in the content which is not easily accessible for them. Falcon volunteers himself to rewrite the crowd-controlled productions Bible. He clarifies that the rules are not super strict, but rather the worry of making mistakes is what holds staff back in some areas of the game. End of session.
There was just one mistake in there. I think it might be an important mistake.
Was that in the last session we just recorded?
Yeah. The last 3 paragraphs, you said CCP review the existing processes which are not perhaps necessary today and exist from the days of T20, which is T20. I think you mistook that as Tech 2 original BPO.
Well, if it's not referring to Tech 2 original blueprints, what is T20?
T20 was a scandal. There was a guy by the name of T20 that was a dev, but he was also a player. And so he would use his dev powers to give his team a hand up. Basically, he would give them BPOs and stuff like that that were really rare. So it was
Are you sure? Are you sure his name was T20?
Yeah, CCP T20. You've never heard of it?
All right, my understanding of it was that a developer was using developer powers to spawn Tech 2 blueprint originals for his alliance.
Ah, interesting. So you know what?
So the scandal was called T2O for Tech 2 original. That was my understanding of. I wasn't in the game at the time, so I'm really not entirely sure.
Well, I guess it plays both ways, which is good. I'm glad you're aware of it. I thought you mistook that as a T2 original blueprint.
Yeah, it was definite. From what I'd heard, it was a scandal about a dev illegally spawning Tech 2 original blueprints for his alliance.
You're
And
right.
so it was the T2O, the Tech 2 original scandal, which with the O being mistaken for a zero, so some people have been misquoting it as T20. But I don't think this is the first time I've ever heard of the hypothesis that it involved somebody named T20.
Yeah, that's what I've read, but I wasn't here when that happened. But yeah, I see it here in
Yeah,
different
neither was
references.
I.
It
This is
says
also before my
CCP
time.
lowercase t and then 20, and I think Carneros met T20, and that's what they call him, T20. So I guess, yeah, it says infamous name T20.
That
So the scandal's actually
it
named after
it's
the
worth
CCP developer.
the next time either of us can find Carneros, it's definitely worth poking him to ask him about this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's possible the guy picked up T20 as a nickname because that's the scandal he was known for.
Oh, here it is. I found it. 2007. It says,
Can you link it in Discord?
yeah, I'll give it to you. This would be a very interesting correction if I'm wrong.
All right, let's take a look.
Well, look at the top there, the byline. CCPT20.
All right.
But let's see what he says. Yeah, he says, I'm truly sorry at the very end. So this is him.
Okay, hold on. On recent allegations, 2007, February the 9th, by CCP T20 Eve Dev Blogs. As you might have read and heard, there were recently some allegations posted regarding developer misconduct that basically come down to developers helping an alliance or alliances gain information they otherwise would not have, developers having an unfair advantage of game mechanics, developers helping themselves acquire goods in game by means of in-house tools otherwise not available to regular players. All allegations mentioned above are untrue except one. Sadly enough, the allegation regarding unlawfully obtained blueprints are, in my case, true. I'm here laying out the facts of what happened in June 2006, so this whole issue, which jeopardized my colleagues, my company, and our community, can be put behind us. I hope for the better. The blueprints in question will be returned to CCP and reintroduced through a new raffle in the future. Specifically, these are the Flameburst Precision Light Missile Blueprint. All right, so these are old names for the missiles before they got standardized to Mjolnir, Inferno, Scourge, and Nova. So Flameburst Precision Light Missile Blueprint. Those would be thermals. Phalanx Rage Rocket Blueprint. I think those were explosives, but I don't remember. Havoc Fury Heavy Missile Blueprint. Bloodclaw Fury Light Missile Blueprint. Spike L Blueprint. Saber Blueprint. Regrettably, my actions inevitably led to a shadow of suspicion being cast on a number of my coworkers, as well as Reikoku and Band of Brothers. I wish to make it clear that I acted alone, and my coworkers and Corp Alliance mates have been cleared of any alleged wrongdoing. As much as this is a confession, it is also a request for your forgiveness for events of which I'm truly sorry. All right, so my reading of this is that CCP-T20 is an alias, and the company did not actually want to publish the specific individual involved.
Well, it's fascinating.
That would be my
Yeah.
interpretation of it. But I'm not entirely sure. Um, because if his actual dev code name was honest to goodness CCP T20, that would be a very interesting coincidence.
Well, okay. I'm going to take your. So you think it still works by saying T2 original blueprints, which was the essence of the scandal.
Yes, that would, I believe that's correct.
Okay, as long as
Um,
you're aware, that's good.
yeah. But basically, this guy being named CCP uh, T20, that being his actual name, would be like I'm reminded of a character from a Flash game series called Mardek. It's on the congregate.com website. And one of the NPCs is basically some sort of viceroy or vizier who's named secret evil advisor. That's his actual name. So that would be the kind of situation here if if this developer's actual code name was CCP T20. More likely, it's an alias that was created for the purposes of the dev. So this employee uh, might actually wrote this, but but it was not published under his real name or code name, or proper code name.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And when I say proper code name, I mean in the sense that Andy Nordgren's proper code name is CCP Seagull.
yeah, I understand. That would be very interesting. It's worth looking into. But if your reading of it is the way you intended it to be, then we're good. We can continue with winter
Yes, that's
2018.
my interpretation of it.
Good.
We'll probably want to try to consult with players who were actually around at the time, and granted, this is now
11,
11 years ago.
11, yeah.
It just turned 11 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There are fifth graders who are younger than this scandal.
That's what makes me so sad. It makes me so sad about Eve. To think how many years have gone by since we started playing this stuff. Oh,
All right. Moving on to the next section. Are you ready? Okay. Session. Winter 2018 feature brainstorming. Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Manbjorn, CCP Orca. This was a brainstorming session to identify which features the Council of Stellar Management feel are most important to change or iterate on. The session was led by CCP Orca and started with a plan being made on how to create the wish list CCP Hellbunny requested in the strategy session. The Council of Stellar Management made post-its with their preferred items, and they were clustered together to see where the initial demand was based on the frequency of the same request. The Council of Stellar Management started voting on their highest priority features, having 3 votes each. A total of 23 different ideas were on the board, with varying degrees of occurrence within the group. The Council of Stellar Management then voted, and a list consisting of 14 items was created. The vote breakdown for the entire list, as well as the estimated scale of each project, estimations were provided by the Council of Stellar Management. Fatigue, 5 votes, small. Nullification, 4 votes, small. War declarations, 3 votes, medium to large. Faction warfare, 3 votes, large to extra large. Dedicated balance team, 3 votes, small but long term. Application Program Interface and Mobile, 2 votes, medium. Geography Shakeup, 2 votes, large. Planetary Interaction, 1 vote, medium to large. Alliance Taxes, 1 vote, medium. Aegis Ventosus, 1 vote, small. Revamps and implant removal, 1 vote, small to medium. Small structures, 1 vote, medium. Trading improvements, 1 vote, small. New drifter ship and module line, wormhole, player versus environment content, 1 vote, large. The Council of Stellar Management then voted again, focusing on the top 5 issues from the initial voting process. Top 5 votes and breakdown. Nullification, 7 votes. Vortex, 7 votes. Factional Warfare, 6 votes. Fatigue, 5 votes. Dedicated Balance Team, 5 votes. This was not a precise enough list as some choices had even votes. A topic was started to decide a non-parallel list. The Council of Stellar Management brought up topics about whether war declarations or nullification would be better prioritized, and the same for fatigue and a balance team. The official top 5 list after discussion: nullification, war declarations, factional warfare, fatigue, dedicated balance team. CCP Manbjorn then wanted Council of Stellar Management input on their assumption of how big of a development time would be needed for these topics, and also some clarification from the Council of Stellar Management on each topic. Nullification, small, heavy impact. Suggestion to remove this ability from combat-capable ships. War declarations, large. Suggestion was to restrict this to corporations with structures. Factional warfare, medium to large. CCP Manbjorn says this would be extra large. Fatigue, small, dial adjustment. Dedicated balance team, small but long term. The Council of Stellar Management would be happy with scrapping the larger suggestions for more small ones. The Council of Stellar Management then retroactively went to the 14 items listed, giving estimated times for those requests too. End of session. Session Events. Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Shreddy, CCP Dragon, CCP Sledgehammer, CCP Delegate Zero, CCP Dren. The team has started by explaining that they have learned a lot from previous events. Earlier events were a good way to learn how the tools worked. Welcome to the Agency was an example of that. The team saw a lot of participation, however, the lack of content resulted in a drop-off in participation. Alpha Strike was a low-effort, low-reward, low-participation event with a loose tie-in to the Alliance tournament. There was limited dev time available for this event. They used this time to fix things in the Agency to get it working like they wanted. This, however, did not drive participation. This information was used for the future. Pilot's license extension rewards were found to not be a good reward at the scale they were being given. The biggest question this event spawned was, why wasn't this in the tutorial? The team realized here that the lack of content creates bad events. Warzone saw better tools and more production time. The event was made more difficult, more content bugs, but fewer feature bugs. The team made sure the apparel items were extremely rare, which drives participation. Logging was added to accelerators to help game masters clarify whether they were working, which was an issue in the past. The team also has a good idea for what accelerators are worth. The team also saw the more skins are available, the more participation they saw. A side effect of this was a market demand for skins, so players could get the skins they wanted off the market or to hunt them. Crimson Harvest saw some cool skins, and the team wanted to see if this helped with participation. although the amount of ships these skins could be applied to was more limited. This was the first time the team was integrating an existing event into the system. New problems were found with accelerators at this stage too, and they were fixed during this process. The team really believes that the accelerators are the primary rewards they wish to use, and thus want to make sure they work correctly. At this stage, the team is also speaking to monetize at this stage at this stage, the team is also speaking to monetization about selling the accelerators for Plex. They are currently sitting on this fence, but the community backlash is a concern, as well as taking away from the value of events. A doctrine was written up by the team. This is a form of guidelines for what the events should be. Another topic the team has is event exclusive and store exclusive skins, which is ongoing and how that should be balanced out. For the holidays, the team wanted an event which would guarantee no game breaking issues. The result was a rogue swarm alert. This allowed them to test difficulty variants between high, low, and null security sites. They found no impact between the sites available in low and null security. They also found that all site types needed to be available everywhere, even if the rarity of the more difficult sites in high security was higher. There was a communications failure with multiple events running at the same time, which lost some speculators in the process. Steve adds that people like their trinkets. CCP Dragon says that this is definitely true and they are keeping it in mind. The mindset with this event was to highlight the changes to alphas and a soft push to get the pilots to fly bigger ships. This also resulted in a dramatic drop in ship prices for certain hulls. This spawned an internal discussion about the economic impact of this. At this point, the data is not yet available, but Crowd Control Productions is keeping an eye on this closely. Steve adds that giving away items which can be manufactured is bad due to the small impact needed to make production unprofitable. CCP Dragon mentions that buffs and nerfs can affect the market in the same regard. Steve says the perception is not as bad, as the items are not being directly injected into the game. Yukiko asks if Crowd Control Productions has numbers on how many ships were given out and how this affects the production. The most extreme case was 6 months of production. CCP Dragon says there are a lot of ways to fix this, such as having material input being needed to get the reward, like the faction ship blueprints needing a hull to use with the blueprint. This is being considered for the future. The prices dropped until a certain point when players started insuring the ships and self-destructing, which stopped the price crash and eventually caused the prices to rise again. CCP Dragon mentioned the arms race event testing a new type of accelerator, which lasts longer but gives less attribute buffs. They also resolved some existing defects, as well as getting a better way to measure the daily activation of accelerators. CCP Dragon shows the group graphs which show typical behavior for participation in the various events, seeing a huge push early on, which then lowers gradually as the event goes on, as well as the similar patterns seeing a huge push early on, which then lowers gradually as the event goes on, as well as the similar patterns seen and how the team can anticipate participation and success of each event they release. The Council of Stellar Management asks about the new event NPCs being added to the non-default overview. Crowd Control Productions explains that they cannot push this to client-side settings, which the overview is. Crowd Control Productions has a workaround in mind which should resolve this in the future by repurposing existing groups for each event. CCP has noticed trends in the ambient challenges which get completed by players without changing their daily routine, and seeing a considerable drop-off in participation for the follow-up challenges with specific tasks. The team found that the accelerator prices would go down further based on when the accelerator expired after the event. If this occurred shortly after the event, the price would crash. Reload asks about the ship attribute boosters, and CCP Dragon says there is a spike in consumption during the events. However, they are seeing consistent use after the events end. CCP Dragon talks a bit about the upcoming event, which is in February, and talks about reusing the Guardians Gala event sites but using new NPCs. There will also be lore tied events into this. The Council of Stellar Management collectively lose it with excitement when some new skins are shown which are tied to this event. Steve asks about faction ammunition being released in these sites as drops. CCP Dragon asks about giving loyalty points in these events. This then went into different color for ammunition, such as pink multi-frequency crystals. CCP Dragon gives another dev a suggestive "can we do this" look. Judge mentions structure fireworks. CCP Dragon says that this is a direction they are going. It has been requested. End of session. I need to drink something. Give me a moment.
All right, we're taking a little break for a second.
All right, not too bad. We're up to page 46 out of 77. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
All right. Session, the economy. Attendees, CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Quant, CCP Fozzie, CCP Nagual, CCP Larrikin, CCP Masterplan, CCP Habakuk. CCP Guard introduces the session as a 5-0 session with a hint of economics. Fozzie says these are some of the smaller tasks the team is working on in the background. He mentions that they are interested in changing the margin trading skill, which is on their roadmap for later in the year. The idea is to remove some of the unintuitive parts of the system which can be deemed exploitative. The aim is that all orders found on the market are valid and can be filled. This is not a gigantic implementation, and the team hopes to slip it in as soon as they can. The change will result in the traditional scams being no longer possible. Corporate tax was brought up as a concern by Noobman. Aerith wants to see research and development agents removed. Like the dust chat icons, this needs a team to work on which could be committing to other stuff. This is essentially a question of priority. Aerith asks about the industry tax formula. Ozzy says that he would love to, but is not optimistic on this happening soon. Reaction tax and industry tax are calculated in a logical but convoluted way. This would be a question of finding the time. Yukiko asks about a fixed price for certain actions and services, as well as customization. Yukiko also asks about a fuel cost for market orders. Aerith asks about a removal of the regional limit on the market. This may be a database load issue. User interface tweaks in the market were suggested. A way to trade loyalty points between players. Loyalty point tokens. Masterplan mentions it is one of the few character-bound items which keeps it interesting. Aerith asks about shading for Alliance Corporation orders. This is not technically feasible. Sort forwards feedback about taxing miners directly like the ratting tax. This was considered a lot, especially for moon mining. The issues would be needing to either calculate its cost of the ore or transporting the ore magically as it is mined, neither of which are trivial. Sort asks about Alliance tax. Fozzie says it's something they want to do someday. Steve mentions faction blueprint copies in boxes which you could sell. Larrikin has a moment of cringe. The dreams the team has about meta module and faction modules is that a blueprint original can be purchased, but with a specific dropped item which is needed to manufacture it. Sort asks about the Plex prices rising and what is a healthy rate of growth. The team says it's monitored. Quant gets some praise for his dashing looks before he can finally start talking about the Plex. The range of prices can be seen the range of prices can be driven from intended gameplay mechanics. Ghost training drove up the price of pilot license extensions, which was bad, but the average rates from normal mechanics and economic shifts are acceptable. Sort asks about the ghost training and if there is anything similar going on. There are no open defects or traction, which shows that it is still a thing in any capacity. The original ghost training was blown entirely out of proportion the first time around. Quant mentions that the game design and economy changes after skill training and Plex is very complicated due to the monetary exchange involved, such as players buying super capitals and the skills, and then it being nerfed for the sake of a healthier game. The Council of Stellar Management asks about the application program interface and subscription renewal and whether this is something which could be fixed. Sort asks about Titan and super insurance. A lot of back and forth took place about removing the system or adjusting it. Larrikin points out that while some players are space rich, there are others who rely on it as they don't literally have the interstellar credits to replace their lost ship once destroyed. Judge jokes about every time insurance is claimed, the premium goes up. Noobman has a question about the market user interface and a way to show the items that are available. Turns out this feature actually existed. A large proportion of this session was redacted under non-disclosure agreement. End of session. Session. Ships, modules, and balance. Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Fozzie, CCP Larrikin, CCP Rise, CCP Manbjorn. The suggested form for this meeting is that the Council of Stellar Management mentions the things they want to see balanced. Jin Sutonia mentions 500 meganewton heavy interdiction cruisers, and Larrikin agrees they want to see this done. This is, however, not a simple matter of messing with numbers. This would be a week of work for a developer, they estimate. It's unfortunately a bit messy right now, code-wise. Larrikin gives some context into how micro-warp drives used to work, which was super messy back in the day. Sort talks about micro-jump drive fleets being really crazy, and they are very effective with everybody using this. The chained micro-jump drive effect is very immersive but effective. Aerith jokes about fatigue for micro-jump drive generators and multi-jumping. Rise says they talked about a local cooldown for the micro-jump drive. Sort mentions the snatched fleets not being bad, it's the defensive capabilities. Innominate mentions that escape mechanics have escalated so much, it's no longer being crafty. Sort follows up asking how big of a project this would be. Fozzie says it depends on the method taken to fix it. Inconsistency scale being added to the chain jumps. A heavy interdictor scram bubble to counter this was suggested. Larrikin's reaction wasn't the greatest. He is worried how that would affect other things. Fozzie says that technically the fleet bursts can be toggled to affect the fleet or everybody, rather than relying on heavy interdictor bubbles for this. Aerith asks about BFGs. Larrikin says that Doomsdays need a balance pass. Capitals generally need a whole balance pass in general. Force auxiliaries being too powerful in wormholes, and so on. Sort says that some people ask about the GTFO max range being adjusted from 100 kilometers to 200. Fozzie thinks that's a good idea and writes notes down. Sort asks if anyone watched the stream last night. Fozzie did, Larrikin didn't. He then refers to the potential of 300 carriers being nuked by the boson. This is a niche that is cool but really unbalanced and something they want to look at. Fozzie says the trigger has been pulled on doing the FC ship. It's in the works, no official release date, but the ball is rolling. Aerith asks, can we nerf Macarials? Sort asks, with the Citadel changes resulting in a change in the meta. Fozzie says that they don't want to get into predictions like that. Fozzie says they could change the BFG to only damage the current Flavor of the Month ships, rename it to the Nerf Cannon. Sort goes back to the nerf to the drop rates and build costs for faction ships, which wasn't sufficient to shake up the meta. Larrikin comes in saying, we would like to look at balancing Macarials. Steve says there are some ships which can only be acquired through the loyalty points store and only as assembled ships. Fozzie says he would like to see this repeated question not have to come again and fix it. The Council of Stellar Management asks about where the priorities lie with balancing. Fozzie says this has fallen into a nebulous area within the company, and they are quite focused about it internally as a side effect of the Council of Stellar Management bringing this up frequently. Rise gives an update on the heavy assault cruiser and assault frigate balance changes, and the new damage control module for these ships. He would like to go into more detail in the meeting, but would prefer getting some more feedback about the current proposal from the Council of Stellar Management. Sort points out the heavy assault cruisers being barely used. Rise says that the balance pass now is hopefully going to address that when it is released. He's not sure if it can make it into the February release. Fozzie says that they are on top. Fozzie says that they are on the top of the balance priority list. Fozzie says that the stuff they have said they want to do in the past is still very much on their collective mind. The question is just finding the time and prioritizing tasks. End of session. Session. Mobility and jump fatigue. Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Fozzie, CCP Rise, CCP Larrikin, CCP Nagwal, CCP Mimic, CCP Masterplan, CCP Lebowski, CCP Habakkuk. CCP Guard explains this is a session to discuss the options for changing jump fatigue, were it to be changed, pros and cons. Suetonia mentions deleting the blue timer. CCP Fozzie says this is an option which was discussed. He says that the teams have discussed their answers and want to find out what the Council of Stellar Management thinks. Sort suggests a keep it simple, stupid approach because of the current algorithm is complicated. Even seasoned fleet commanders make mistakes and ruin lots of playtime for people. Aerith says that it feels like players are punished for playing more. Suetonia says that this affects the burst players who play over the weekend. Innominate says that this does effectively deal with power projection. CCP Fozzie asks if the consensus is that they do not want to go back to power projection days. The Council of Stellar Management confirmed. Judge and others say that local mobilization is affected too greatly. Getting back home after a fight also causes jump fatigue. Aerith believes that Aegis Sov has reduced the need for fatigue. It causes awkward scenarios for fights when players have fatigue from doing other activities and then have a call to arms to deal with, but are then stuck with fatigue. CCP Fozzie says that this causes issues with players being incapacitated and unable to take part in other activities. Suetonia says this also adds complexities to junior fleet commanders who may have their fleet split. Sort points out that players may bring interceptors to fights instead to avoid fatigue. Newman asks how many consecutive jumps and how much time it should take is probably the topic, rather than the fact that jump fatigue being bad. Sort says the timer could be 6 minutes to avoid the issues surrounding siege abuse. Aerith suggests a ball and chain mechanic, which would cause a certain area in space which doesn't cause fatigue. Sort mentions some accelerated fatigue recovery based on range from headquarters systems. Larrikin points out that this would cause a significantly stronger defensive stance. CCP Fossey says there is a way to decouple jump bridges from jump fatigue. This could be a possibility with new jump bridge-like structures. Innominate goes back to the advantage defenders get and how much this would affect different scenarios for attackers if they are coming in to evade versus okay, I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be invade. Innominate goes back to the advantage defenders get and how much this would affect different scenarios for attackers if they are coming in to invade versus just coming into enemy territory to mess with people. This also comes with risk of players needing to wait for longer to get back home, leaving their space open to attack. Innominate then mentions the incredible difficulty of moving super capital ships right now, and the defenders having an advantage already in that regard. Sort says that the potential to attack people further away takes days, and that turns people off from fighting, needing to pre-move fleets and such. Sort says that the algorithm is the problem. It is unclear. A flat rate for every jump you take was suggested, but some faults were found there. Sort says that the creep issue is not as big as it was before. Masterplan asks what makes the Citadel chain so powerful. Aerith says it is the tether which allows for individual moving to be safe. Masterplan agrees and suggests that this ability to jump directly into tether should be looked at as part of any solution. Larrikin mentions that the main issue appears that players will do a couple of jumps, then not be able to do anything in Eve for the rest of the day. A question is brought up by the Council of Stellar Management about using jump bridges for capitals. This was possible years ago and was too powerful. Sort asks what would be considered a fair cooldown if a cooldown were considered. CCP Fossey says that there is the potential to consider other mechanics and moving away from fatigue. Rise says an internal discussion has been had to change this to a vulnerability penalty rather than the general ability to jump. So projection and travel distance would still be possible and unlimited with a small flat timer, but ship statistic penalties or something along those lines would be implemented instead, so the fleet would be weaker when projecting further. This would really only affect capital jumps, but not jump bridges. Heavy consideration needs to be given so that changing this mechanic does not mean that players feel they are unable to use their capital ships once they land and have to accept that they need to log off for the night. The Council of Stellar Management talks about it not being practical anymore to own large areas of space, so there is a smaller buffer involved. Changing the mechanic in such a way that players are unable to use their capitals instead of just accepting that they can log out for the night should be considered heavily. Although Larrikin is concerned about suitcase carriers, having the attribute penalty character based as was suggested would go back to the main issue with fatigue now. Rise says it needs to be predictable. There is general dislike to these penalties applying to subcapitals as well, despite the suitcase carrier. Steve suggests jump bridges not having the negative effects, and the effects have a relatively quick bleed off. Sort mentions that a suitcase carrier problem isn't as big a problem as having a bunch of carriers on the field. This gives the defenders a chance to call in reinforcements, as the defender had some time to know about the incoming fight. Aerith says that avoiding the whole moving the day before is preferable. Fozzie, Sort, and Aerith have a discussion on some hypothetical strategic implications and get carried away from the initial point. Noobman goes back to the timer. Larrikin and Aerith say that a flat cooldown and penalty would definitely be the likeliest course. Last 10 minutes of the meeting are being considered for going way outside the box. Sort asked if, in the meantime, whether we were working on removing fatigue from jump bridges. The team answered that this is not happening at present, but could be part of the plans when we work on the final functionality, remaining in POS only. Everybody cheered. End of session. Um, okay for the most part. I'm just getting a little bit sleepy. We're up to page 55 at least, though. Session Marketing and Brand Recruitment Program. Attendees CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Goodfella. CCP Goodfella recently gave an internal presentation on the recruitment program and hopes to get a lot of feedback about it. The glory days of the recruitment program were around 2012, with a spike again around Ascension, but not performing well now. About 5% of the current recruitment going on is through scams. The current metrics do not correct for alt creation. The metrics also show all payment methods. Judge says that it would be interesting to see who is actually paying with cash rather than Plex. The retention and engagement with the product from the recruitment is much better. The program is about 12% of revenue, despite being 5% of creations. When CCP Goodfellow looks at the graphs and data available, he sees that this is a valuable tool which can be improved, and a one-size-fits-all kind of program doesn't work with the game evolving. CCP Goodfella has ideas on how to improve the program, which he wants to bounce off the Council of Stellar Management. He has several parts he wants to iterate on. He wants to introduce the recruitment program into the player journey, which would improve the visibility of the program. Right now, it's quite hidden. Steve suggests a short window before it's introduced to new players to ride the new game hype the player is going through. Also focusing on getting a friend to the game, which is proven to improve retention. Reload mentions that it's good to have two new players together. They may be lost, but at least they are lost together. The Council of Stellar Management would prefer this being shown in the launcher rather than a notification via email. Yuki asks about in-game mails or notifications. Having it customized in some regard is perhaps not necessary. Emphasis on visibility is the important part. The Council of Stellar Management also talk about it being difficult to convince players to get a second account, but after that it is much easier to justify getting more. CCP Goodfellow mentions two separate programs: affiliate programs and buddy programs. The buddy program would be more specific and trying to get the two to play together. The affiliate program being more suited to being spread through YouTube comments and so on. Sort talks about making it easier to download the game, which is well hidden in the current site, as well as this to have banners for the affiliate or buddy link. Steve points out a way to have retroactive buddy program grace period for new players who want to use it but have already set up an account and a character with sentimental attachment. CCP Goodfellow points out that the new player does not have friends necessarily in real life who want to play the game. He then mentions a mentor program. Sort points out that this is something which was discussed with the agency, which could be tied together nicely. The Council of Stellar Management agrees that a mentor group would be better than mentor people to avoid any bad habits or exploitable scenarios. Mentoring would also need vetting and monitoring from the Interstellar Services Department or a ranking system like eBay has, with reviews and activity so that the rookie can make an informed choice. Two alpha accounts linking up together and subscribing could be something to tie rewards to. CCP Goodfellow mentions that one of the next steps he wants to take is to look at the rookie recruiting corps to see what they are doing, which makes their campaign so successful. Sort points out that the war declaration system needs to be addressed to help retain players and avoid the harassment which is occurring from war declaration corps targeting rookie corporations. CCP Guard talks about the war declaration system being an unbalanced system right now. Innominate points out that suicide ganking rookies is rare, as there is no profit to be made from it. This is up until a certain threshold, however, but is not as big of an issue as war declarations. CCP Guard says that the best system for crowd control productions would be one which could be deployed and wouldn't require constant evaluation. The desire is for the focus and system to be for the players. CCP Goodfella refers to the award structure which is currently in place. The recruiter only gets a reward when the recruited player subscribes. CCP Goodfellow wants to see a step-based program. If the player completes Inception, does agency stuff, first purchase, 1 month, and multi-month subscription. Sort also mentions that there should be rewards for various things besides recruiting one player, such as getting multiple alpha players into the game. Sort wants to see some very visible and unique rewards for becoming a recruiter. Noobman mentions the World of Tanks, World of Warships recruitment tier system, which in EVE Online could be used with skill point milestones. CCP Goodfella asks quickly if having non-tradable rewards would be okay, which the Council of Stellar Management agrees with. A reverse bounty office for recruiters was discussed, tying into the ratting system for... A reverse bounty office for recruiters was discussed, tying into the rating system for recruiters. A white aura like the dust characters had in local chat, with a recruiter stamp like bounty. CCP Guard asks what rewards will be good. CCP Guard asks what rewards would be good for recruitees. Sort mentions that instead of unallocated skill points, players would have training at an accelerated rate. Avoid anything which can be consumed and placed on the market. CCP Goodfella mentions some bonus systems from other games that have interesting solutions. CSM says that simply logging in would be sufficient to trigger it. In-game events would trigger it. Inception career agents. Aerith mentions the risk-adverse nature and suggests some kind of free insurance on ships with a cap. Other suggestions besides skill accelerators would be ship attribute enhancers, standing gain boosters. Default overviews were mentioned to be changed and modernized to make onboarding new players. Aerith and Sort mention events which make it to Twitch front page is a good recruitment boost, whether it's the Alliance Tournament, Burnjita, Leviathan Planet Crash, Hulk Again. End of session. Let me get something to drink.
Yeah, you sounded like Yoda right there at the end.
All right.
Some good stuff in this section.
CSM presents.
Sorry.
Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Burger, CCP Mimic, CCP Fozzie. No worries. Session. CSM presents. Attendees: CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Burger, CCP Mimic, CCP Fozzie, CCP Larrikin. This is a freestyle session intended to discuss topics that fall outside of other planned sessions or whatever the Council of Stellar Management wants to bring up. Aerith brings up that he would like to see the R4s being balanced. I believe R4 here is a reference to Moon Goose, so R4s being resources that can only be obtained on 1 out of every 4 moons. Fozzie says that these will be going into high security and wormholes in less quantity when the moon mining is expanded. This is slated for the February release. Fozzie says this may not be enough, but they want to monitor this. Standard ores are going to be upgraded as well. Sort asks about the Mexilon shortage in null security, which is a bottleneck. Sort asks if this was something Crowd Control Productions would add this to R4's or alternative moons. It's one of the options, says Fozzie. Evil cackle noted from Aerith about the moon distribution. Sort goes back to the kicking out gunners, which was addressed already in the previous meeting. He moves on to corporate hangars and having more corporate divisions. This is a mechanic tied to the corporation management system, however, which complicates this. Sort goes on to ask about the corporate roles. Mimic says that there has been a lot of cleanup and goes back to the division question, saying it's very integrated to the inventory window, and CCP Fozzie chimes in that this is not a trivial issue, but is something they'd want to look into. Sort asks about the voting system and blueprint locking. This is an in-progress project with no promised date. The voting system is a bit convoluted. The voting system is a bit convoluted and has a required. Sort asks about the voting system and blueprint locking. This is an in-progress project with no promised date. The voting system is a bit convoluted and has required a rewrite. Sort asks about a separate hangar on the Citadels for modules to allow gunners to quickly fit it without needing to be in the corporation. Fozzie says this will be considered as he is not sure how difficult hangar and other inventory additions would be to the current structure system. Aerith asks about the stack limit. This is likely to be a performance issue. Spider notes an example where 3,000 units messed with internal tools. Repackaged container warning message was requested by Sort for his fellow Australian players. Fozzie says this should be fairly easy. Aerith mentions a deadlock about repackaging a bunch of items and then undocking. It's on the backlog. Innominate asks about a user interface element showing drones assisting you. Larrikin notes that this is cool. The Council of Stellar Management asks about a second wallet division. Larrikin thinks this would be hard, but defers to engineers to make that call. Sort mentions the deliveries hangar's limitations, and Fozzie says that this is likely to be a feature which they will discontinue rather than attempt to fix it after reviewing it. The Council of Stellar Management mentions a way to see if a player is offline to bypass the watch list. Fozzie says that the chat system is getting a revamp anyway, which may mean this may go away. However, the ability to invite a player into a locked channel will give two different messages depending on whether they are online or not. Sort asks for ACLs for chat channels. Sort mentions that fleets cannot be saved if they aren't named differently. They all need to be renamed. Loading a saved fleet also doesn't keep the order. Innominate mentions standings and whether their order can be evaluated. This is to easily identify AWOXers and such. Larrikin wants to review the process, as this is not going to be an easy fix. The process, as is probably like that for a reason. Sort asks about a way to show in local or overview if a player is in the pending remove state. Larrikin points out this is similar to the previous request with a different approach. The conversation goes into Crime Watch with a mix of corp hopping. This then goes into swapping ships in space in engagements with no comment from Crowd Control Productions. The conversation then goes into the auto warp after being bumped for a certain time. The team which was working on this was disbanded. Fozzie does say that this would be good to do. Reload asks about the order of the standings. It is clarified to be Alliance, Corp, Character. Larrikin looks for official documentation on this in the EVE University wiki. Sort mentions the Poco standing system and availability. Adding an option there to use alliance standings would be nice. Fozzie doesn't know how hard that would be, but adds a note. Sort says that smaller groups taking sovereignty is very expensive due to infrastructure hubs and citadels sharing the same materials. Larrikin says they'll look at this. Innominate mentions a couple of aspects of the user interface which can't be copied from. Fozzie asks for a wiki page. He also mentions the skill queue showing the time left, but not the skill points countdown, which was removed. A key binding for abandoning active drones was requested. Sort asks about adding another timer for infrastructure hubs. Fozzie says they doubt they will do this. Sort says everyone agrees that the Force auxiliaries are powerful right now and asks about a straight nerf to the repair amount. Fozzie says hypothetically it's possible. Larrikin says that some analysis would be needed before just whipping out the nerf bat. There was going to be a supercarrier Force auxiliary, but this fell off the roadmap. Sort says that the Ferox is way ahead of other battle cruisers and asks if some balance pass could be made. This is the circle of life in EVE between heavy assault cruisers and battle cruisers. Reload asks about the rapid, heavy, and light missile balance pass. Fozzie says, like many other things, it was pushed back. Sort asks about the networked sensor array and carriers which are tethered being difficult to counter. Hold on, somebody's knocking on my door.
Taking a small break. Where are you three guys? I'm watching this channel, so it must be three others. We'll start again in a second. Which is past a big point where...
All right.
Oh,
Nobody at the door. I'm beginning to think somebody was just hammering something into a wall or some such. Don't know where it was coming from. Where did I leave off? Oh, right. Sword asks about that. Okay. Sort asks about the networked sensor array and carriers which are tethered being difficult to counter as they start playing docking games. Fozzie says the plan is to prevent tether when fighters are in space, but they can just be abandoned. An anti-fighter flak cannon for citadels was suggested. The original issue seems to originate from the current meta due to playing around with the engagement range. Larrikin doesn't want to cause undue hope and thus does not talk about the thing he was thinking about. Larrikin then asks that it be removed from the minutes. GM Spider denies this request. Fozzie sighs with silent relief. Sort brings up Citadel repair and time dilation. Fozzie says that what can be affected by time dilation can be adjusted. However, somewhere a line needs to be drawn. Associating time dilation and the repair timer was considered, however, it seems to be counterintuitive. Fozzie says that at the end of the day, this is a doable change, but there would be a trade-off. End of session. Session Community. Attendees, CCP Guard, CCP Falcon, CCP Grendel. First question was regarding game mods using EVE assets, and Crowd Control Productions responded they can't be allowed. While we'd love to be able to do it, lifting any restrictions just opens a floodgate of legal problems. Falcon agrees with Judge's point that as soon as this isn't enforced, the door is wide open. The topic derails a bit, and Sort brings it back to the original topic and asks if this illegal use of assets is in the end user license agreement. Community comments that this is simply basic copyright laws. Yuki asks about Patreon and content creators. It's fine if it's not being used as a means of gating anything in terms of content. Giveaways also cannot be flavored to the subscribers as an example. It has to be random. Reload asks about releasing videos early to Patreon people before releasing to the rest of the community. This is considered gating, but still an interesting question which Guard wants to explore further, as there are many variables. Sort asks about in-game alliance lotteries and whether they are permitted. CCP Falcon says they are against the end-user license agreement. The conversation brought up some examples about games of chance without asset or ISK transfer, such as kill reports being tickets in a raffle, and how that compares to ISK or assets being an entry. The Council of Stellar Management felt this entered a gray area. However, Guard considered this to be giving away assets like Secret Santa and so on. There is no monetary entry fee involved. CCP Grendel steps in and talks about the realistic goals for the team. Communications was a team of 11 people with a lot of experience. Right now, with CCP Grendel, Falcon, and Guard, it's 3, and there is a lot of overlap for the different projects, and a goal is to improve the sense of ownership. There are going to be some future hires. Whether they will be on the EVE Online team is to be confirmed. He mentions the lack of expertise to run the Alliance tournament, as well as the FanFest tournaments, despite there being a strong will and desire to do them. CCP Grendel talks about being on a fast track to catch up with various aspects. There is a plan to hire a social media manager to allow Falcon and Guard to focus on other work. There will be a reliance on contracting work for a lot of the FanFest work, as well as hiring players to get involved as well. Crowd Control Productions will be referring to agencies to plug the gaps to plan events. This also has the potential to allow CCP employees to be more available to mingle with the players. CCP Grendel mentions that with a lot of community plans, there's the question of desire versus feasibility. The Council of Stellar Management asked about the change in 2019 to events, and Guard sees this as a potential to expand more on smaller events to make them more official. CCP Grendel says there is the potential to expand into Steam forums, as this is an untapped source with approximately 40% of new players coming into the game from there. Sort mentions the Twitch and O7 show. A meta show could be brought in when there are big wars. Basically wanting more streaming with players coming on as guests to create some content. Guard talks about the streaming community and how they work together and really help out with this process internally, and that this is definitely something which should be nurtured. Sort asks that the new social media manager checks their sources about any in-game events before posting them, even contacting the Council of Stellar Management for reliability. One community guy is biased towards Brave, and Sort demanded this be added to the notes. CCP Grendel talks about giving streamers the opportunity to grow their audience via publicity from Crowd Control Productions at events or being on the official Crowd Control Productions stream. CCP Grendel also mentions that he wants to see fewer spikes and more consistency on streams and their activity. CCP Grendel, on the public relations side of things, wants to target the science fiction fans rather than players of other games. Permaband is brought up for FanFest. The band is coming back for the concert, despite some members, employees not being at Crowd Control Productions anymore. Guard says that a lot of the goofy stuff, such as permaband and videos, was brought up in water cooler discussions. In the current climate, that can't happen, but the future holds many things. Sort brings up a point about metrics and interpreting metrics when it comes to the health of the game. whether this is about people logging in for fights or using sovereignty. The metrics may show that a lot of people are using a mechanic, but that raises the question of whether they do it because there is no alternative. CCP Grendel says that in his job, he doesn't find metrics helpful, but rather the comments, context, and community sentiment climate. He also mentions that one person can say something and 20 others think it but don't say it. At the same time, the community team agrees that the context of comments on the various social outlets. This can, however, create a moodscape to see what the general sentiment of the community is, which is that there are 5-year-old legacy issues existing in the game. A quality of life expansion being requested did not come as a surprise to CCP Grendel. He also notes that the community feels the game is static. The snowballing effect caused when an issue is brought up, which then spirals into other issues in the game, shows there is something fundamentally wrong which needs to be addressed. Super Segway was asking about the Alliance tournament. Eve Newtown has been contracted to run a lot of the heavier loads. Regardless, it will 100% happen if Falcon has his way. End of session. I thought it stands for Eve Newtown.
Well,
All right, hold on. I'll just
the
restate the
owner
last paragraph.
the owner was an events thrower, and he meant it to read event with an underscore to separate Eve and NT. It was a really silly title.
Gotcha. All right. Super Segway was asking about the Alliance tournament. Eve and T have been contracted to run a lot of the heavier loads. Regardless, it will 100% happen if Falcon has his way. End of session. All right, I know we're only about 11 pages away from the end of this, but yeah, I'm starting to lose it here.
Okay.
I'm making more and more fatigue-related mistakes.
Actually, that was a very good mistake, but I totally understand. You're the one that has to concentrate vigorously.
Yar.
All right, we'll pick it up again and finish. 11 pages to go.
Yep.
All right, man. Thanks.
So, when do you want to do this? Tomorrow morning, evening?
Tomorrow earlier, like, I don't know, about 3 o'clock Pacific time.
3 a.m. Pacific time?
No, 3 p.m.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, easy.
We are Eve players, so 3 a.m. Pacific time isn't out of the question either, right? We're so nutty. But
I'd have to go to bed right now.
Yeah, totally. So we'll wrap up those 11 pages, and then we'll edit it up and have it out, say, by next Monday.
Sounds like a plan. All right. I assume we're still on air, of course.
Yeah, you can say goodbye.
All right.
To 5 people.
All right. I am logging off. Have a pleasant evening, everybody.
All right. Good night. Thanks, guys.
All right. Disconnecting from Discord.
All right. Thanks again, guys.